Ada had 3 minutes to decide whether to use the knife strapped to her thigh. King Damson had buried 5 brides in 3 years and never shed a tear. But the man watching her now, dark hair falling into haunted green eyes, shoulders rigid with something that looked less like cruelty and more like desperation, didn't match the monster she'd imagined. And when he spoke, his first words were a question that changed everything. How much did they tell you about what happens in this room? The silk nightgown felt obscene. Ada stood in the center of King Damson's bedchamber, hyper-aware of how the fabric clung to her body, how exposed she was. The room sprawled around her, all dark wood and darker shadows, lit by candles that did nothing to soften the oppressive weight of stone walls and vaulted ceilings. A massive bed dominated one side, its black sheets turned down in silent invitation. Or threat. She couldn't tell which. Her fingers brushed the knife hidden against her thigh, the blade a sliver of cold comfort beneath the silk. She'd strapped it there while the servants dressed her, ignoring their pitying glances and whispered prayers. They'd painted her lips red, lined her eyes with kohl, braided her dark hair with tiny pearls that caught the light, made her beautiful for a king who destroyed beautiful things. 5 brides in 3 years, women who'd entered this room and never left it breathing. Ada pressed her palm flat against her stomach, trying to steady her breathing. The fear sat there like a stone, heavy, immovable. But beneath it, something sharper. Rage. At her uncle Gregor, who'd sold her for political favor and a purse of gold. At the council who'd arranged this farce of a wedding. At the kingdom that whispered about the cruel king's cursed brides, but did nothing to stop the deaths. At herself, for being powerless to refuse. The ceremony had been brief, clinical. The high priestess's hands had shaken performing the binding rites, her voice barely above a whisper. Ada had worn white, traditional for royal weddings, and smiled for the gathered court even as her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd caught only glimpses of the king throughout, a tall silhouette beside her, broad-shouldered and rigid. His face had been mostly obscured, hidden behind the traditional ceremonial mask during the binding. She'd seen the hard line of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders, caught the gleam of dark hair. But his features remained a mystery. He hadn't looked at her once during the vows. The court had watched in silence, pitying, afraid. No one had congratulated them afterward. They'd simply dispersed, like mourners leaving a funeral. Now, alone in his chamber, Ada studied her surroundings with the careful attention of someone preparing for battle. Heavy tapestries lined the walls, depicting hunts and wars rendered in dark thread. A desk sat near the window, buried under papers and maps. Bookshelves stretched floor to ceiling, crammed with volumes that looked well used. The room felt lived in but lonely, like a space designed for one person who'd long ago stopped expecting company. No bloodstains, no obvious weapons, nothing that screamed, "Murder happens here." But that meant nothing. The previous brides had died in their sleep, they said. Hearts simply stopped beating. No marks, no violence, no explanation. Just women who'd closed their eyes and never opened them again. Ada's hand tightened on the knife hilt. If something came for her tonight, she'd go down fighting. Footsteps echoed in the corridor beyond, measured, unhurried. Her pulse spiked. The lock clicked. The door swung open. King Damson stepped in, and Ada's breath caught. Here, in the light of his private chamber, she could finally see him clearly. And he wasn't what she'd expected at all. The rumors painted him as monstrous. Some said literally, claiming he shifted into a beast under the full moon, that his eyes glowed red when angered, that he'd torn apart enemies with his bare hands. But the man standing before her was devastatingly, terribly human. Young, 26 at most, only a handful of years older than her. Tall and lean, with the kind of build that spoke of controlled strength rather than brutality. Dark hair fell past his collar, slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Sharp features, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, a mouth that might have been sensual if it weren't set in such a grim line. And his eyes, forest green, ringed with exhaustion so profound it looked carved into his bones. He wore simple black clothing, not the formal regalia from the ceremony. No crown, no jewels, just a man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. In another life, another situation, Ada might have felt that flutter of attraction that comes from encountering unexpected beauty. But terror had a way of drowning out everything else. His green eyes found hers across the room, and Ada saw something flicker in them. Not desire, not even interest, just a bone-deep weariness that made her anger falter. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. His voice was rough, unused to softness. "I didn't ask for you. Before we continue, please take a second to like this video. It tells me you want more stories like this." Of all the things Ada had prepared herself to hear, that wasn't one of them. "I'm your wife. You're a girl the council sold me without my consent." He moved further into the room, closing the door behind him but not locking it. The gesture felt deliberate, an exit left open. They do that every few months. Find some nobleman's daughter or merchant's niece, arrange the papers, and present me with a bride I never wanted, as if repeating the same horror will somehow yield different results. Ada's mind raced. "You didn't want to marry me?" "I don't want to marry anyone." The words came out harsh, almost angry. "I've been trying to stop these farces for a year, but the council insists. They need alliances, they need an heir, they need—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. "It doesn't matter. You're here, and you need to understand what that means." "I know what it means," Ada said, lifting her chin. "I'm bride number 6. You're going to kill me." Something that looked like pain flashed across his face. "No. No? I don't kill them." Damson moved to the desk, poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter with hands that weren't quite steady. "Something else does. Something I can't see or fight. They fade, grow weaker, colder. Then their hearts just stop." He drank, the motion sharp and bitter. "I've tried everything. Hired every mage in the kingdom, consulted scholars, brought in healers from across the continent. No one can identify what's killing them. No curse shows up under examination. No poison in their blood. They just die. And His voice cracked. "I bury them and apologize to corpses who can't hear me." Ada stared at him. "If you know they're going to die," she said slowly, "why do you keep accepting brides?" His laugh was bitter. "The council forces it. They arrange everything, sign the contracts before I even know a bride has been selected. By the time I find out, it's done. The girl is already on her way." He turned to look at her, and the fury in his eyes wasn't directed at her. It was aimed inward. "I tried refusing once. They threatened to declare me unfit to rule, said a king who can't provide an heir is a king who's failed his duty." "So you let them die?" "I tried desperately to save them and fail every time." He turned away, and his voice went hollow. "I know every detail. Their favorite flowers, their fears, the last words they spoke before they never woke up. I have nightmares about them every night if I manage to sleep at all." Ada's throat felt tight. She'd spent 3 days preparing herself to face a monster. Instead, she'd found a man trapped in his own personal hell, forced to watch people die and blamed for murders he didn't commit. "You're not what I expected," Ada blurted out, then immediately wanted to take it back. Damson's eyebrow lifted slightly. What did you expect? A monster. The word came out before she could stop it. The rumors, they say you're cruel, dangerous, that you... She trailed off, heat flooding her cheeks. That I what? Turn into a beast? Drink blood? Enjoy watching my brides die? His voice held no anger, just weary resignation. I've heard them all. I didn't mean... The rumors are half right. Damson set down his glass with a sharp click. I am cruel, Ada, just not in the ways they think. I've executed traitors without mercy, crushed rebellions before they could take root, ordered strikes against enemy territories that killed civilians along with soldiers. He met her gaze directly. I'm not a good man. I'm the king this broken kingdom needed after my father's weakness nearly destroyed us. I make hard choices and live with the consequences. But I don't murder innocent women in their sleep, and I don't want you to die. The conviction in his voice made something shift in Ada's chest. Then what do you want? She asked. Damson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had gentled. I want you to survive tonight. Tomorrow, I'll send you away with enough gold to start over anywhere you choose. Somewhere far from here, where whatever's killing my brides can't reach you. The marriage contract. I'll dissolve it, claim it wasn't consummated. The council will be furious, but they'll accept it eventually. He moved toward the door. I'll sleep in my study tonight. You stay here, lock the door if it makes you feel safer. In the morning, you're free. He was leaving, actually walking away, giving her the room, the safety, the choice. Ada's mind spun. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. She was supposed to fight or flee or die. Wait, she heard herself say. Damson paused, hand on the door handle. He didn't turn around immediately, but his shoulders tensed like he was bracing himself. When he finally looked back at her, something flickered in those green eyes. Hope, maybe, or longing quickly buried, like he'd been wanting her to stop him but hadn't dared ask. Yes? His voice was carefully neutral. Ada's heart hammered. She should let him go, should take the escape he was offering and run as far as possible from this cursed place. But something in his defeated posture, the weight of grief he carried, the way he was looking at her now like he was memorizing her face, it all made her hesitate. How long? She asked. How long do the brides usually survive before they start fading? His shoulders tensed. A few days, a week sometimes. The longest was 2 weeks. And you said you've investigated, tried to find answers. Obsessively. I have an entire library of research in my study. Every text on curses, dark magic, supernatural afflictions I could find. I've spent 3 years trying to understand what's killing them. Have you considered, Ada said carefully, that maybe you need a different kind of help? Someone who isn't a mage or a scholar? Now he did turn, confusion crossing his face. What do you mean? Ada took a breath. I'm good at solving puzzles, at finding patterns others miss. My father used to say I had a mind for mysteries. It was true. Before her parents died, before Uncle Gregor sold everything including her, she'd spent hours poring over her father's case files. He'd been a magistrate, and she'd loved helping him untangle complicated disputes. Let me look at your research. Maybe fresh eyes will see something you've missed. Ada, you should run from this place, not volunteer to... I'm already here, she interrupted. Already married to you, at least on paper. And if I leave tonight, the council will just find you another bride in a few months. Someone else will die. She met his gaze. But if we solve this, if we figure out what's killing them, maybe we can break it. Save the next girl. Save all of them. Damson stared at her like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. You want to help me. I want to stop this, Ada corrected. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise giving way to hope, quickly shuddered. If you stay, you risk dying. I'm risking that either way. At least this way, I'm doing something useful. She straightened her shoulders. Besides, I refuse to be a passive victim. If something's coming to kill me, I'd rather see it coming. A ghost of a smile touched Damson's mouth, there and gone. You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. Ada glanced down at herself, suddenly aware again of the ridiculous nightgown. But I'm going to need real clothes if we're going to work tonight. I can't think in this thing. That almost smile came back, lingering a bit longer this time. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines. There are guest chambers 2 doors down. The previous queen's wardrobe is stored there. You're welcome to anything that fits. Thank you. Damson nodded, then seemed to hesitate. Ada? Yes? You could still leave. I meant what I said. You don't owe me anything. She thought about it, about starting over somewhere new, somewhere safe, living a quiet life, forever wondering if another girl had died in her place. I know, she said quietly, but I'm staying anyway. His eyes held hers for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded once and left, pulling the door closed behind him. Ada exhaled slowly, her pulse still racing. She'd just volunteered to stay in a cursed castle with a king who'd buried 5 wives. She should be terrified. Instead, for the first time since Uncle Gregor had sold her, she felt something else. Purpose. She retrieved the knife from her thigh, set it on the bedside table, and went to find clothes that wouldn't make her feel like a sacrifice. The guest chamber smelled of lavender and disuse. Ada found the wardrobe exactly where Damson had said, a massive oak piece filled with dresses that had belonged to his mother. The late Queen Elaine died 3 years ago in the same attack that had killed the king. Ada ran her fingers over the fabrics, settling on a simple wool dress in deep blue. It fit well enough, though she had to cinch the waist with a belt. She braided her hair into something practical, washed the ceremonial makeup from her face, and felt infinitely more like herself. When she returned to Damson's chamber, she found him at his desk, surrounded by papers. He'd lit more candles, casting the room in warmer light. He'd also changed, trading his formal clothes for a simple linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Ada tried not to notice the lean muscle of his forearms, the way the candlelight caught in his dark hair. Tried not to think about how different he looked from the monster she'd imagined. How his hands, which supposedly crushed rebellions without mercy, moved with careful precision as he sorted through documents. Better? He asked without looking up. Much. Ada approached the desk, curiosity overcoming caution. What are you reading? Timeline of deaths. He gestured to a chart covered in neat handwriting. Trying to find patterns. They all died within 2 weeks of the wedding, but the deterioration rate varied. Seraphine lasted 4 days. Beatrice made it 13. I thought maybe it was connected to their bloodlines, or their level of magical sensitivity, or even what they ate. But I can't find any consistency. Ada leaned closer, studying the chart. His handwriting was surprisingly elegant, each entry meticulously detailed. Dates, symptoms, environmental factors. He'd been thorough to the point of obsession. What about emotional factors? She asked. Damson glanced up. What do you mean? Well, you said they faded, grew weaker, colder. That sounds almost like... She hesitated, unsure how to phrase it. Like something was draining them. Life force, maybe. What if it's not about bloodlines or magic, but about feelings? Feelings? He repeated, skeptical. Think about it. These were arranged marriages, political alliances. The brides probably came here expecting... She trailed off, heat rising in her cheeks. Expecting to do their duty, Damson finished quietly. To be wives in truth, not just name. Right. So they would have been trying to connect with you, emotionally, physically. What if that connection is what triggers the curse? He was quiet for a moment, processing. Then color crept up his neck. Actual embarrassment, making him look younger, almost boyish. That would explain why the deterioration starts immediately after the wedding night. Does it start immediately? Damson pulled out another document, not quite meeting her eyes as he flipped through it. Seraphine complained of fatigue the morning after the wedding. Cold hands. He paused, then glanced up at her, and their gazes caught and held. Margot developed the same symptoms within 12 hours. Claire took 2 days, but... He trailed off, still looking at her. Really looking, like he was seeing her properly for the first time. Taking in the way candlelight caught in her dark hair, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she'd leaned forward intently while they worked. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither could name yet. Ada's breath caught. She needed to break whatever this was before it became dangerous. So she asked, "What about Claire?" Damson blinked, seeming to shake himself from whatever had momentarily held him. He looked back down at the notes, but she caught the faint flush coloring his cheeks again. She kept to herself that first night, barely spoke to me. And Beatrice? The one who lasted longest? She hated me, he said simply. Made it very clear she'd been forced into the marriage and wanted nothing to do with me. We spent the first week barely speaking. He looked up, realization dawning. She only started showing symptoms after we'd begun talking, finding common ground. Ada's pulse quickened. So what if the curse doesn't kill based on time? What if it feeds on developing emotion? The closer you get to someone, the stronger it becomes. Damson stared at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's why you're still healthy. We haven't... He gestured vaguely between them. The wedding night consummation. The others all tried to fulfill their duties. But we've just been talking. Heat flooded Ada's cheeks as the implication sank in. They were discussing intimacy like it was a clinical variable in an experiment, but the awareness between them suddenly felt charged. So, the physical connection triggers it? Not just physical. Emotional too, I think. His voice had roughened slightly. They were trying to build something with me. A marriage, an alliance. Opening themselves up to... He met her gaze. To possibility. Which means that investigating this together is going to be dangerous. The more time we spend together, the more we risk. Triggering the curse, he finished. His jaw tightened, and he looked away from her deliberately, putting distance between their gazes. Then you should go. Tonight. I'll give you the gold. Arrange an escort. No. Ada surprised herself with the firmness of her tone. If the curse feeds on connection, then we just need to be careful. Keep our distance emotionally. This can be a working relationship, nothing more. Ada, I'm not leaving, she said. We have a lead now. Something concrete to investigate. If we can identify the curse, maybe we can break it. Damson looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. You're remarkably stubborn. So I've been told. She pulled up a chair, putting the desk between them, a physical barrier that felt necessary. Now show me everything you found about curses that drain life force, and let's figure out who would want to do this to you. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then he exhaled slowly and pulled out a leather-bound journal. The list of people who might want me dead is unfortunately long. I made a lot of enemies consolidating power after my parents died. Then we start there. Ada accepted the journal, careful not to let their fingers brush. Tell me about your enemies. And so they worked, hours bleeding together as they pored over research. Damson walked her through the political landscape, the nobles who'd resented his reforms, the territories he'd annexed, the rebellions he'd crushed. Ada took notes, asked questions, built mental maps of relationships and grudges. She learned that Damson had inherited a kingdom on the brink of collapse. His father, King Aldrich, had been beloved but weak, too trusting, too easily manipulated by his council. When enemies struck, killing both the king and queen in a coordinated attack, they'd expected the young prince to be equally malleable. Instead, they'd gotten Damson, who'd taken power at 23 and spent the next year systematically eliminating threats, who'd executed traitors, stripped corrupt nobles of their titles, and rebuilt the kingdom's defenses with ruthless efficiency. They called me cruel because I didn't follow my father's approach, Damson said, leaning back in his chair. It was well past midnight now. The candles burned low. But my father's gentleness got him killed, nearly destroyed the kingdom in the process. Do you regret it? Ada asked, being hard instead of kind. I regret that it was necessary. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. I regret that I had to become someone capable of ordering executions and sleeping soundly after. But no, I don't regret saving the kingdom. That's honest, at least. I try to be. His gaze found hers across the desk. You asked earlier what I want. The truth is, I want to stop pretending. Stop playing the role of the perfect king, the diplomatic ruler, the man who has everything under control. I'm tired of pretending. The raw vulnerability in his voice made Ada's chest tight. Then don't. Pretend, I mean. Not with me. That would be dangerous, Ada. Everything about this situation is dangerous. She met his eyes. But if we're going to work together, we need honesty. So yes, be yourself, even if yourself is cruel sometimes. His eyebrows rose slightly, surprise maybe, or relief. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. They held each other's gaze for a moment too long. Ada felt something stir in her chest, the beginning of curiosity, of wanting to understand this complicated man. It would be so easy to... No, she couldn't afford that. Ada looked away first, deliberately breaking whatever was building between them. We should establish rules, she said, her voice firmer than she felt. For working together. No more. Personal questions unless they're relevant to the investigation. No unnecessary time alone. And She forced herself to meet his eyes again, needing him to understand. We can't let this become anything more than what it is, a temporary alliance, because if we do, the curse wins. Damson's expression shuddered, the warmth from moments ago vanishing behind that controlled mask he wore so well. You're right. He stood, putting physical distance between them. It's late. You should sleep. What about you? I don't sleep much these days. He moved toward the study door, his posture rigid. I'll be next door if you need anything. The bed is yours. Damson, Ada said, stopping him. When he paused but didn't turn around, she continued quietly. Thank you. for being honest with me, for not being what the rumors claimed. His shoulders tensed, and for a moment she thought he might turn back. Give it time. You might change your mind about that. Then he was gone, leaving Ada alone. In the too large bed, her mind spinning with curse theories and half-formed plans. But when she finally fell asleep, hours before dawn, she slept deeply, dreamlessly. For the first time in years, the nightmares that usually plagued her didn't come. She didn't know that in his study, Damson had finally dozed off as well, head pillowed on his arms, surrounded by research. That for the first time since his parents' deaths, he'd found a few hours of peace. They'd both sleep through the night, safe in each other's proximity, neither realizing that the curse was already studying them, waiting. Ada woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of pure panic before memory returned. The wedding, the king, the investigation. She sat up, taking stock, still dressed, still alive, still in Damson's chamber. Still cursed, potentially, though she felt fine. No fatigue, no coldness. If anything, she felt more rested than she had in months. A soft knock preceded the door, opening. A woman entered, older, weathered, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Good morning, Your Majesty. I'm Vera, the head of household. His Majesty asked me to ensure you had everything you need." Your Majesty. The title felt absurd. Ada was a sold girl playing at being queen, but she smiled. "Thank you, Vera. I'm fine. Is the king awake?" "He's in his study." Vera's expression softened. "He asked me to tell you that breakfast is laid out in the solar, and he'll join you when you're ready. Also," she hesitated, "it's good to see someone survive the night. We were worried." "I'm planning to survive more than one night," Ada said firmly. Vera's smile was genuine. "I hope you do, Your Majesty. Truly." After Vera left, Ada washed and braided her hair, steeling herself for day 2 of this strange new existence. The solar was a sun-drenched room overlooking the gardens, the breakfast spread elaborate. Ada helped herself to bread and fruit, studying the view. The gardens below were beautiful but haunting, filled with flowers in deliberate groupings, 5 distinct sections, each with different blooms. Her breath caught as understanding hit. "The memory garden." Damson's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him in the doorway, looking somehow more exhausted than last night despite the sleep. "I planted flowers for each of them. It seemed inadequate, but it was something." Ada's throat tightened. He moved to pour coffee, his movements stiff. "How are you feeling?" "Good. Surprisingly good, actually." She studied him. "You look terrible." A startled laugh escaped him. "Most people don't say that to a king." "Most people aren't married to one." The words came out before she could stop them, and heat flooded her cheeks. "I mean, I know what you mean." But there was something warm in his eyes now, a hint of amusement softening the exhaustion. "And you're right. I feel terrible. Barely slept." "But you did sleep. I heard you go into the study." "For an hour, maybe." He sipped his coffee. The nightmares came back. Ada remembered her own dreamless sleep, so unusual for her. "I slept well. Better than I have in years, actually." Damson's brow furrowed. "That's unexpected. Usually you have trouble sleeping?" "Since my parents died, yes." She hadn't meant to share that, but the words slipped out anyway. "Nightmares. Most nights I only manage a few hours." Something shifted in his expression. "I have insomnia, since my parents' deaths as well. Most nights I don't sleep at all." They stared at each other, the coincidence hanging between them. Ada's mind raced. What if that's connected? To the curse, I mean. What if— A sharp knock interrupted. Lord Byron entered without waiting for permission, his expression grave. He was in his 50s, distinguished, with silver threading through his dark hair, one of Damson's father's oldest advisers. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty." Byron's gaze flicked to Ada, something unreadable in his eyes. "But we have a situation. Border reports indicate movement from the Blackwater Pack. They're testing our defenses." Damson's entire demeanor changed, softness hardening into something cold and commanding. "How many?" "At least 50 warriors. They're claiming we violated the treaty by expanding settlements into disputed territory." "We expanded nothing. Those settlements have been there for decades." Damson set down his coffee with careful precision. "They're looking for an excuse to push boundaries, testing whether we're distracted." Byron's eyes flickered to Ada again. "The timing is unfortunate." "The timing is deliberate." Damson's voice was ice. "They always probe for weakness after a royal wedding, hoping I'm distracted by—" He trailed off, jaw tightening. "It doesn't matter. I'll handle it." "Your Majesty, perhaps it would be wise to—" "To what, Byron? Ignore it? Let them think I'm weak?" The command in Damson's tone made even Byron straighten. "Assemble the council. I want full reports on our border positions within the hour, and send word to Commander Garrett. I want our northern battalions on high alert." "Yes, Your Majesty." Byron bowed and left, but not before Ada caught another strange look directed her way. The solar felt colder suddenly. Damson stood at the window, hands braced on the sill, his shoulders tight with tension. This was the cruel king the rumors spoke of, sharp, commanding, dangerous. "You have to go," Ada said quietly. "I have to handle the border situation, yes, but I'll be fine. Keep working on the research. Besides," she added, trying for lightness, "absence might be good. Keep our emotional connection minimal, remember?" Damson turned, and the conflict in his expression made her chest ache. "I don't like leaving you alone." "I'm not alone. Vera's here, and I assume there are guards everywhere." Ada moved closer, then caught herself, maintaining distance. "Go be a king. Do what you need to do. I'll keep investigating." He studied her for a long moment. "You're sure?" "Damson, go." Something like gratitude settled across his face. Then he nodded and strode from the room, already shifting into the role of commander, king, the man who crushed threats without mercy. Ada watched him go, and the room felt immediately colder, like something vital had been extracted from the space, leaving only stone and shadow behind. The feeling unsettled her, this acute awareness of his absence, as if her body had already started cataloging his presence as something safe. Which was absurd. She'd known him for mere hours, but her traitorous heart didn't seem to care about logic. It only knew that the room felt wrong without him in it, and that realization was more frightening than any curse. Ada forced herself to turn away from the door, to focus on the research spread across the desk. Work. Investigation. Those were safe. Those wouldn't betray her. She spent the day in his study, consumed by research. Vera brought lunch and dinner, both of which Ada ate absently while poring over texts on curses, dark magic, binding spells. She made notes, drew diagrams, tried to find patterns. The curse that killed the brides had specific characteristics, activated after the wedding ceremony, fed on emotional connection, drained life force progressively, left no physical trace, and couldn't be detected by conventional magic. That last point bothered her. Every curse left some signature, some magical residue. Unless— Unless it's not a curse, Ada murmured to herself. What if it's something else? She pulled out texts on parasitic magic, on entities that fed on emotion, found references to shadow creatures, to bound demons, to... there. A passage about grief magic, spells powered by loss and heartbreak. Rare, difficult to cast, requiring massive emotional energy, but nearly undetectable because they didn't read as traditional curses. Ada's pulse quickened. Grief magic. Who would have enough grief to power something like this? She was still reading when the door opened. Damson entered, looking even more exhausted than this morning, his shirt stained with what might have been blood. Ada was on her feet instantly. Are you hurt? Not mine. He moved to wash his hands in the basin, his movements mechanical. The border situation required a more direct response. You fought? I executed 3 Blackwater warriors who'd crossed into our territory and killed a farmer's family. His voice was flat. Left their bodies at the border as a message. The rest retreated. Ada studied his face, the careful blankness, the tension in his jaw, the way he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. He was waiting for her to recoil, to see him as the brutal king from the rumors, but all she saw was exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of a man who'd done violence because the alternative was worse, and who would carry the memory of it regardless. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Damson looked up, genuine surprise breaking through his careful mask. For what? That you had to do that you have to be that person. Something cracked in his expression. He dried his hands slowly. Most people congratulate me on quick justice, or condemn me for brutality. I'm not most people. Ada moved closer, forgetting her own rule about distance. And I think you already carry enough condemnation without me adding to it. Damson was quiet for a long moment. When he finally looked at her, his eyes held a vulnerability that made her breath catch. Thank you. For seeing me and not looking away. I could say the same to you. Ada's heart hammered. They were standing too close, close enough that she could see the hollow of his throat, the way his pulse beat there, the line of muscle visible where his collar hung open, still damp from washing. He smelled like leather and something darker, like smoke and pine. Her gaze drifted to his mouth before she could stop herself. And no. This was exactly what she couldn't do. She took a deliberate step back, putting necessary distance between them, cleared her throat. I found something in the research. Show me. She led him to the desk, explained her theory about grief magic, watched his mind work through the implications, analytical and quick. So, we're looking for someone who's experienced massive loss, he said slowly. Someone close enough to me to want this. Someone with access to dark magic practitioners. And someone who would benefit from you being isolated and vulnerable. Their eyes met. Byron keeps acting strange, Ada said carefully. The way he looked at me this morning. Byron was my father's closest friend. He's been helping me since I took the throne. But doubt crept into Damson's voice. Though he has been pushing hard for these marriages, insisting I need an heir, need alliances, even after 5 brides died, Ada finished. That doesn't seem like normal. Concern for succession. Damson moved to the window, processing. If it's Byron, we need proof. Solid evidence. I can't move against a council member without cause. Then we find it. Ada joined him at the window, careful to maintain a few inches of space. Together. He looked down at her, and something shifted in his expression. Ada, what you said earlier about sleeping well last night, I've been thinking about it. And? I think, he hesitated. I think maybe you should stay in here, in this chamber, with me. Heat flooded her cheeks. Damson. Not like that, he said quickly. But if we're both sleeping better when we're near each other, maybe that's a defense. Against the curse or against whatever's happening. Separate beds, he added. Or I'll take the couch, but just nearby. Ada knew what she should say, knew that sharing a room meant more time together, more opportunity for the connection that would kill her. Every practical instinct screamed that this was a terrible idea. But she did sleep through the night. No lying in the dark counting her heartbeats until dawn. And Damson had slept too. She'd heard the change in his breathing, the way the restless sounds from his study had finally gone quiet. Okay, Ada heard herself say, but we maintain boundaries, emotional distance. Agreed. But the way he was looking at her suggested emotional distance might already be impossible. They fell into a routine over the next few days. Mornings, Damson handled kingdom business, council meetings, military briefings, the endless work of ruling. Ada used those hours to investigate, digging through Byron's history, his connections, looking for any link to dark magic or grief magic practitioners. Afternoons, they worked together in the study, careful not to touch, maintaining physical space. Though sometimes Ada would reach for a book at the same moment Damson did, their fingers nearly brushing before one of them pulled back. They talked for hours, about the curse at first, but gradually about everything else. Ada learned that Damson had been raised on poetry and philosophy, trained for gentle diplomacy like his father. I was supposed to negotiate peace, not wage war, he said one afternoon, staring at a map of his kingdom. My father used to say violence was the failure of imagination. Then violent men killed him, and I learned that sometimes imagination isn't enough. He learned about her parents' deaths, not just the bare facts, but the details she'd never told anyone. How she'd been at the market when the fire started, how she'd run home to find the house already engulfed, her mother's screams cutting through the smoke, how Uncle Gregor had pulled her back when she'd tried to run inside. I can still smell it sometimes, Ada admitted quietly, not looking at him. Burning wood. It sends me right back. Damson was silent for a moment. Then, roses. For me. My mother wore rose oil. After she died, I couldn't stand the scent. For 2 years. Had the gardeners remove every rose bush in the castle. Ada looked up to find him watching her with an understanding that went bone deep. They'd both lost everything. Both had to rebuild themselves from ash. These were the moments Ada would remember later. Not grand gestures or passionate declarations, but quiet admissions in afternoon light that slanted through the study windows. The way he'd bring her tea without asking, remembering she liked it with honey. The way she'd started leaving his favorite texts open to passages she thought he'd enjoy and would find them read, corners carefully turned down. Small intimacies that felt more dangerous than any kiss. Uncle Gregor gambled, Ada said one afternoon, staring at the research without really seeing it. Lost everything, including his self-respect. When the council approached him about the marriage, he saw it as salvation. Sold me for gold and political favor, and called it duty. Damson's jaw tightened. Where is he? Now? His province, I assume. Why? Because I want to make sure he understands that you're under my protection, that if he ever tries to contact you, claim any authority over you. He cut himself off. Sorry. You probably don't need me threatening your remaining family. He's not family. Ada's voice was harder than she'd intended. Family doesn't sell you like livestock. Damson reached out instinctively, like he might touch her hand, then caught himself, drew back. They were getting too close. Ada could feel it, the way her heart jumped when he entered a room, the way she'd started watching for his smile, the warmth that spread through her chest when he laughed at something she said. This was supposed to be professional, a working relationship. But every night they slept in the same chamber. Damson on the couch he'd brought in, Ada in the massive bed. And every night they both slept deeply, peacefully, for the first time in years. "Tell me something," Damson said one evening, as they prepared for sleep. He was at the couch, she was at the bed, a careful distance between them. "Something no one else knows." Ada pulled the blankets up to her chin. "Why?" "Because I want to know you, the real you, not the public version." He settled onto the couch, his face half in shadow. "We're stuck in this strange situation together. Might as well be honest about who we are." She thought about refusing, about maintaining those boundaries they'd agreed on but kept bending. Yet in the darkness, with only candlelight between them, the truth felt safer. "I wanted to be a scholar," she said quietly. "Before everything happened, I loved puzzles, mysteries, figuring out how things worked. My father used to let me help with his cases. I thought maybe I could study law or history or—" She trailed off. "Then they died, and Uncle Gregor said education was wasted on girls. Locked up my father's library, sold most of the books. I had to hide the few I managed to save." "That's why—" "You're so good at this," Damson said. "The investigation. You have a mind for it. I'm probably just stumbling around in the dark." "No. You found the grief magic connection. You're the one who suggested looking at Byron. You see patterns I miss." His voice gentled. "You're brilliant, Ada. I hope you know that." Warmth spread through her chest, dangerous and sweet. "Your turn. Tell me something." He was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then, "I've never courted anyone, never had a real relationship. My parents arranged a betrothal when I was 19, but she died before we married. After that, everything was politics and survival. I don't know how to—" He exhaled roughly. "I don't know how to be romantic, or sweet, or any of the things someone like you would deserve." "Someone like me? Intelligent, brave, beautiful?" Ada's breath caught. "Damson. I know, emotional distance, boundaries." But his voice had roughened. "But you asked for honesty, and I'm trying to give you that. You should know that I'm terrible at this, at feelings, at expressing them. My father tried to teach me poetry and courtship, but I was always better with strategy and combat. So, if I'm clumsy about this, about what I'm starting to feel—" "Don't," Ada whispered. "Please don't say it." "Why not?" "Because if you say it, if we acknowledge it, the curse wins. It feeds on connection, remember? On feelings." Her voice cracked. "I can't let you care about me. Not if it means I'll die." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Then Damson spoke, his voice low and intense. "Then we find the proof against Byron tomorrow. We break this curse, Ada, because I'm done pretending I don't—" He cut himself off. "We end this. Soon." Ada's heart hammered. She wanted to go to him, to cross the distance between couch and bed, to stop fighting what was building between them, but fear held her in place. "Good night, Damson," she managed. "Good night, Ada." She lay awake for a long time, listening to his breathing even out in sleep, and wondered how much longer they could maintain this pretense of distance. On day 6, Ada woke to ice in her veins, a coldness spreading from her fingertips up through her hands like frost creeping across a window. She sat up too fast, her vision swimming, and stared at her fingers in the pale morning light. They looked normal, moved normally when she flexed them, but they trembled ever so slightly. No, 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 no. Ada stumbled out of bed, plunged her hands into the wash basin. The water was room temperature, but it felt scalding against her frozen skin. She pulled them out, watched droplets slide off fingers that had no sensation, no warmth. The trembling grew, not from cold, but from pure animal terror. This was how it started. This was how the others had died. She'd been so careful. They'd maintained boundaries, kept physical distance, told themselves they could investigate without connecting. But her traitorous heart hadn't listened. It had been cataloging him for days, the way he rubbed his temples when frustrated, the rare smile that transformed his face, the gentleness in his voice when he thought she wasn't listening. She'd been falling and hadn't let herself admit it until her body started the process of shutting down. Days. She had days, maybe a week if she was lucky. Ada dressed quickly, her mind racing. They needed proof against Byron today. Needed to confront him, break the curse, before... Ada's breath came short and sharp. She pressed her frozen hands against her chest, trying to feel her heartbeat, needing to confirm it was still there, still strong. For now. She found Damson in the study, surrounded by new documents. He looked up when she entered, and his expression immediately sharpened. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Ada." He crossed the space between them, and she saw fear flicker in his eyes, real fear, the kind he probably hadn't let himself feel in years. "Your hands are shaking." She pulled them behind her back, but it was too late. He'd already seen. "I'm fine." "You're lying." The words came out soft. He reached for her slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers circled her wrist with infinite care, drew her hand forward into the light. His thumb brushed across her palm, and she watched the color drain from his face. "You're freezing." "It's nothing, just... don't lie to me." His voice cracked. "Not about this." Ada's throat burned with unshed tears. She'd been trying so hard to be brave, to pretend she could handle this, but the devastation in his eyes shattered what little composure she had left. "It's starting," she whispered. "The symptoms. I felt it when I woke up." The sound he made was barely human, grief and rage and helplessness compressed into a single breath. He released her hand like the contact physically hurt him, stumbled back 2 steps, then 3, putting distance between them as if space could somehow undo what was already happening. "This is my fault." His hands were shaking now too, curling into fists at his sides. "I pushed too hard, got too close. I should have sent you away the first night, should have..." "Damson, stop. We end this today." His voice had turned to steel. "I'm confronting Byron, with or without solid proof. You can't. If you're wrong, if it's not him, then I'll deal with the consequences." He moved to his desk, pulled out a dagger. "But I'm not watching you die, Ada. I refuse." The conviction in his voice, the barely controlled fury. This was the cruel king everyone feared. And right now, all that ruthlessness was focused on saving her. "Wait," Ada said. "If we're going to confront him, we do it smart. We need leverage." She'd spent hours going through Byron's correspondence, his financial records. Most of it was above board, but there were gaps. Payments to unknown recipients, trips to the southern provinces where dark magic practitioners were known to operate. "Here," she showed Damson. 3 years ago, Byron made a series of payments to someone in Ashwater. That's where the grief mages work," Damson finished. His eyes met hers. "That's a connection. It's not proof, but it's enough to question him." We do it in the council chamber, with witnesses. Agreed. His gaze dropped to her hands again, and pain flickered across his face. How do you feel, really? Cold, tired, but I'm okay. I'm functional. She tried to smile. I'm not going to collapse dramatically at your feet. That's not funny, Ada. I know. She moved closer, forgetting caution. They were past that now anyway. But we're going to fix this. Today. And then what? Ada didn't have an answer, because she didn't know what came after. If they broke the curse, if she survived, what then? A real marriage to a man she was falling for? Or freedom to leave, to start over somewhere new? Did she even want to leave anymore? Before she could spiral further, a knock interrupted. Vera entered, her expression troubled. Your Majesty, Lord Byron is requesting an audience. He says it's urgent. Damson's hand found the dagger at his belt. Send him in. Byron entered moments later, and something was off immediately. His usual composure had cracked, his eyes darting between Damson and Ada with barely concealed anxiety. Your Majesty, Byron said, a slight tremor in his voice. I need to speak with you, privately. Anything you have to say can be said in front of my wife. Byron's jaw tightened. It's about her safety, about the curse. The air in the room went electric. Damson's entire body tensed. What do you know about the curse? I know who cast it. Byron's words came out in a rush. I know who's been killing the brides, and Your Majesty, you need to act now because... He looked at Ada, genuine fear in his eyes. Because she's in danger. Immediate danger. Who? Damson's voice was deadly quiet. Byron took a breath. Lady Rita, your aunt. Damson went very still. That's impossible. Rita loved my mother. She's been... A memory surfaced, unbidden. Rita's hand on his shoulder at the funeral, her voice hollow. She was the best of us, Damson. The very best. The way she'd stared at his mother's portrait for hours, unmoving. How she'd insisted on arranging the flowers personally, choosing all his mother's favorites. He'd thought it was grief. Just grief. But Byron was shaking his head. She loved your mother too much. He said carefully. Not as a sister-in-law, as more. It was an open secret in the court, years ago. Queen Elaine knew, tried to help Rita move on, find someone else, but Rita... He paused. She never did. For 23 years, she loved a woman who could never return those feelings. And when your parents died, something in Rita broke. That doesn't make sense, Damson said, but his voice had lost conviction. Why would she blame me? I didn't... You have your mother's eyes, Byron said quietly. Her voice, her mannerisms. Rita sees her every time she looks at you. He met Damson's gaze. And you're alive, building a life, finding love, when Elaine is dead. I think Rita couldn't bear it. Damson's face had gone pale. Why didn't you bring this to me earlier? I suspected, but Rita is clever. She left no proof, no trail. I've been trying to find evidence for a year. Byron pulled out a small journal. This morning, I finally found it. Her diary, hidden in her chambers. It's all there. Her feelings for your mother, her grief, the curse. He handed the journal to Damson, who opened it with shaking hands. Ada moved close enough to read over his shoulder, and her stomach turned. Page after page of obsessive love, of heartbreak, of watching Elaine choose Aldrich, watching their happiness, slowly festering into bitterness. And then the final entries, after Elaine's death. He has her eyes. I can't look at him without seeing her. It's a torture, having him alive when she's gone. He doesn't deserve love, doesn't deserve happiness. Not when she's dead. Not when I'm here, alone, carrying this grief that never ends. I've found a way, a grief mage in ash water. I'll bind the curse to my own heartbreak, make it feed on any love he tries to build. He'll watch them die, one by one, until he understands, until he's as alone as I am. Ada's hands were trembling. Where is she now? Her chambers, Byron said. But we need to move quickly. The curse, it's tied to her life force. If she realizes we know, she might... A commotion echoed through the castle, raised voices, someone shouting for the king. Damson was already moving, Ada and Byron racing behind him. They found Rita in the great hall, surrounded by guards who looked uncertain whether to restrain her or step back. She stood in the center of the room, wild-eyed and trembling. When she saw Damson, something crumpled in her expression. "I know you found the journal," Rita said, her voice breaking. "I know Byron told you everything." Rita. Damson stopped several paces away, his hand instinctively moving to shield Ada. "Why? After everything we've been through, why would you—" "Because I can't look at you without seeing her." The words tore out of Rita like a confession that had been building for years. "You have her eyes, her voice, her warmth. Every time you laugh, every time you smile, it's like she's here but not here. And I can't—" Her voice cracked. "I can't bear it." Ada felt the curse pulsing between them, fed by Rita's anguish. Her own hands were freezing now, the cold spreading up her arms. She had minutes, maybe less. "You loved her," Ada said quietly, stepping forward despite Damson's protective stance. "Queen Elaine. You loved her for years." Rita's face twisted. "I loved her my whole life. Watched her marry your father." She looked at Damson. "Watched her build a family, a kingdom, everything I could never have. And I told myself it was enough just to be near her, to serve her, to—" She broke off, tears streaming down her face. "And then she died, and you lived, and I thought, why? Why do you get to keep living, keep loving, when she's gone?" "So you cursed him," Ada said, "made sure anyone who tried to love him would die." "I made sure he'd understand." Rita's voice rose. "Made sure he'd know what it feels like to love someone and lose them over and over, to watch happiness slip away no matter how hard you fight for it." Damson's hands had clenched into fists. Ada could see him struggling, grief and fury warring across his face. She stepped between him and Rita, a deliberate barrier. "I'm dying," Ada said simply. "Right now. The curse is killing me." Rita's eyes flickered to her, something almost like regret crossing her features. "And I could hate you for that," Ada continued, her voice steady despite the cold creeping toward her heart. "I could beg Damson to execute you, to make you suffer the way you've made others suffer. But that's what you expect, isn't it? That's what you believe love does. It destroys. It takes. It leaves nothing but pain." "Because it does," Rita whispered. "No." Ada's mind raced back to the leather-bound journal she'd found tucked behind other books in the library a day ago, Queen Elaine's private writings. At the time, she'd skimmed the entries about Rita without understanding their significance, filed them away as potentially useful but unclear how. Now, with Rita standing before her, broken and grieving, the pieces finally clicked into place. "Your love destroyed you because you never let it go. But that wasn't Elaine's fault, and it's not what she would have wanted for you." She opened the journal to a page she'd marked, her hands shaking from cold and urgency. "Listen, this is from 10 years ago. I saw Rita watching me again today with such sadness in her eyes. My heart breaks for her. She deserves her own happiness, her own love that's returned in full measure. I've tried to help her see that my affection for her, though genuine, will never be what she needs. I pray she finds someone who can give her what I cannot. She deserves that. She deserves to be loved the way she loves, completely, wholly, without reservation. Rita made a wounded sound. Stop. She knew. Ada pressed on, even as black spots danced in her vision. She knew how you felt, and she didn't pity you or mock you. She wanted you to be happy. She grieved that she couldn't give you what you needed, but she wanted you to find it elsewhere. She's dead, Rita said brokenly. None of that matters now. It matters because you're dishonoring her memory. Ada's voice was gentle but firm. The woman who wrote these words, who cared about you, who wanted you to find joy, would be devastated by what you've become, by the pain you've caused in her name. Tears poured down Rita's face. I don't know how to let her go. You don't have to let her go, Ada said, swaying now as the curse tightened its grip. Damson caught her elbow, steadying her. You just have to let the grief go. Let the bitterness go. Choose to honor her by living the way she wanted for you, with the possibility of happiness, not drowning in pain. Rita's gaze moved between Ada and Damson, taking in the way he held her, the desperation in his eyes. You love her, she said to Damson. Really love her. Yes, Damson said hoarsely. And you? Rita looked at Ada. You love him. Yes. Ada's voice was barely a whisper. Which is why I'm asking you to release the curse. Not for me, I'm probably dying anyway, but for him, because Elaine loved her son, and she wouldn't want him to suffer like this. You know she wouldn't. Rita crumpled, sinking to her knees. Great, heaving sobs shook her shoulders. I've been so angry for so long. I don't know how to be anything else. You can learn, Ada said, dropping to her knees in front of Rita despite Damson's protest. She took Rita's hands, warm against her frozen ones. It's not too late to choose differently, to choose healing instead of pain, to honor Elaine's memory by becoming the person she believed you could be. For a long moment, Rita just stared at their joined hands. Then she closed her eyes, and Ada felt something shift, a great unraveling, like knots being untied one by one. I release it, Rita whispered. I release the curse. I release the grief. I release. Her voice broke. I release her. Not from my heart, but from this twisted thing I made of my love. The curse shattered. Ada felt it break like ice cracking under the spring sun. The cold that had been creeping toward her heart recoiled, and then warmth rushed in so fast it burned. She cried out, doubling over as sensation returned to her limbs in a painful flood. Her fingers tingled viciously, her chest ached, her heart stuttered and then beat strong and sure. Life, pouring back into her in waves that left her gasping and shaking. Damson caught her before she could fall, pulling her up and into his arms with enough force to steal what little breath she'd regained. His hands moved over her frantically, her face, her shoulders, her arms, like he needed to confirm she was alive. Ada. His voice broke against her hair. I thought. She couldn't speak yet, could only cling to him, her face pressed against his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her cheek. I'm okay, she finally managed, though the words came out rough and unsteady. I'm okay. Yeah, pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Your hands, are they? Ada flexed her fingers between them, warm, steady, alive. They're perfect. Rita remained on the floor, looking smaller somehow, broken but no longer dangerous. What happens to me now? she asked. Damson looked at her for a long moment. You leave. Tonight. There's a monastery in the southern mountains. They help people who are struggling. You'll go there. Heal or don't. But you'll never set foot in this castle again. Rita nodded slowly. That's more mercy than I deserve. It's what my mother would have wanted, Damson said quietly. And despite everything, I still remember the aunt who used to tell me stories when I was small, before grief turned you into this. Rita's face crumpled again, but she stood with dignity. I'm sorry, she said, looking at Ada, for what little that's worth now. I'm sorry. Then she left, escorted by guards, and Ada sagged against Damson. You saved her? He said wonderingly. Even while dying, you tried to save her. I saved us, Ada corrected. All of us. Because Rita was right about one thing. Love can destroy, but only if we let it. Only if we choose destruction over healing. Damson's hands came up to frame her face. I choose you, he said fiercely. Every day. For the rest of my life. I choose you, Ada. I choose you too, she whispered, and kissed him. Ada had been kissed once before, a clumsy, closed-mouth press from a boy in her village when she was 14, over before she'd understood what was happening. This was nothing like that. This was heat and hunger, and 3 years of Damson's forced solitude crashing into 6 days of her desperate restraint. His mouth opened against hers, and she made a small sound of surprise that became something else entirely when his tongue swept against her lower lip. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and he responded by backing her against the nearest pillar, his body a line of heat against hers. Ada, he breathed against her mouth, and the rawness in his voice sent electricity down her spine. His hands were in her hair, tilting her head back so he could kiss her deeper, and she let him, wanted him to, wanted everything she'd been denying herself, every touch she'd forbidden, every moment of closeness she'd pushed away. When his lips left hers to trail along her jaw, she gasped. When his teeth grazed the sensitive spot below her ear, she trembled. And when he whispered her name again, sounding wrecked and wanting, she realized she was trembling too, not from cold or fear, but from desire so intense it left her lightheaded. We should, she started, though she had no idea how that sentence was supposed to end. Should what? Damson pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes dark and heated, his lips swollen from kissing her. Stop, because if that's what you want. No. Ada pulled him back down, kissing him with a boldness that surprised them both. Don't stop. So he didn't. He kissed her like he'd been starving for it, and Ada kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, both flushed and disheveled, Ada realized she was still pressed against the pillar, her legs wrapped around his waist, his hands supporting her weight like she weighed nothing. That was, she started. Everything, Damson finished, his forehead dropping to hers. That was everything. They stayed like that for a breathless moment, and then reality slowly filtered back in. The great hall around them, the morning light streaming through high windows, the fact that they'd just kissed like that in front of... Ada's eyes flew open. She looked around frantically, heat flooding her cheeks. The hall was empty. Byron? Damson said, following her gaze with a slightly dazed expression. A smile tugged at his mouth. He must have left. Oh, God. Ada buried her face against his shoulder, mortification warring with relief. Do you think he saw? Definitely. Damson's chest rumbled with quiet laughter. But he's discreet, and considering he just watched us break a death curse, I suspect he's willing to overlook some enthusiasm. Ada groaned, but she was smiling too. They were alone in the great hall, dawn light painting everything gold, and she was still wrapped around him. "So what happens now?" Ada asked, her voice soft. Damson pulled back to look at her. "Now? Now I court you properly. No curse, no investigation, no life or death stakes. Just us, learning each other, building something real. I'd like that. Even though I'm terrible at romance?" Ada smiled. "Especially because you're terrible at it. Watching you try will be entertaining." He laughed, a real laugh, warm and unguarded. "You're cruel. I learned from the best." She kissed him again, softer this time. "But yes, Damson, court me, woo me, try your very worst poetry and most awkward romantic gestures. I promise to only laugh a little." "That's generous of you." 6 months later, Ada stood in the memory garden, planting flowers beside the 5 memorial sections. Not white blooms for death, but living red roses, a symbol of survival, of life persisting despite tragedy. "They would have liked you," Damson said from behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "The others, if they'd had the chance to know you." "I wish I could have saved them too." "You did, in a way. You broke the curse, made sure no one else would die." He kissed her temple. Ada leaned back into him, watching the sun set over the gardens. 6 months of learning each other, his awkward attempts at poetry, her systematic approach to kingdom management, their shared love of late-night strategy games and early morning walks. 6 months of waking up beside each other, the nightmares and insomnia gone, of slow, sweet intimacy and passionate arguments about policy, of building something neither had expected: partnership, friendship, love. "The council wants to know when we're having an heir," Ada said, mostly to tease him. Damson groaned. "They can wait. I'm not sharing you yet." "Possessive?" "Absolutely." He turned her in his arms. "You're mine, Ada, and I'm yours. That's how this works." "That's very romantic, in a barbaric sort of way. I told you I was bad at this. You're getting better." She kissed him, tasting laughter and love and home. "Besides, I kind of like the barbaric approach. I knew there was a reason I married you. You married me because the council forced you to. I stayed married to you because I fell in love with you." His expression sobered. "And I choose to stay married to you because you make me better, happier, more human." "That's actually very good," Ada admitted. "Have you been practicing?" "Only for the last few months." She laughed, and he captured the sound with another kiss. They stood like that for a while, wrapped around each other as darkness fell, and Ada thought about choices, about being sold to a cruel king and finding a complicated man instead, about staying when she could have run, fighting when she could have submitted, choosing love when it would have been safer to walk away. She'd been livestock, sold for gold and politics, but she'd become a queen on her own terms, not through ceremony or contract, but through choice. Hers and his, freely given. "Ready to go inside?" Damson asked eventually. "I believe you promised to help me with those trade agreements. Only if you promise to help me with the university proposal. The one where you want to open education to common-born students?" "The very same." She'd been working on it for months, using her position to create the opportunities she'd been denied. "You said you'd support it." "I do support it. You're going to bankrupt us with idealism, but I support it." His smile was warm. "Besides, watching you argue with stubborn nobles is one of my favorite pastimes." "Because I'm so eloquent?" "Because you're terrifying, in the best way." They walked back to the castle hand in hand, their shadows stretching long across the gardens. Behind them, 6 sections of flowers bloomed, 5 in memory, 1 in celebration. A reminder that from grief and curse and near tragedy, something beautiful could grow. If you were brave enough to choose it, if you were strong enough to believe that love didn't have to destroy, that it could heal instead, and if you were lucky enough to find someone who chose you back, freely and completely, eyes open to every flaw and strength. Ada had found that. Against every odd, every expectation, every rumor about cruel kings and cursed brides, she'd found home. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.